Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Today I bring back Michael Michelini. How you doing, Michael?
Great, Danny. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
No worries. It's been a while since we had you on, and I think the last time I actually see you is when I was over for the cross-border summit that you put on last April. So give us a
Yeah.
bit of background. What you've been up to in the last year or so?
Yeah. Actually, I think I was on in I remember you were joking about me being in Kathmandu.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I was on the show, and but I've been doing good. Getting deeper into Amazon, and I moved to Thailand, and
Well, we're going to have a chat about how to become a Chinese seller on Amazon, aren't we? No, sorry. No, it's basically how to use a company or set up a company in Hong Kong or an Asia-based corporate structure. Is that right?
yeah. We can give some perspectives and why people might do, why people might not want to do it, and have a conversation about. Of course, it's always hard. It's This kind of stuff. It depends on the person and their situation. But yeah, I think we'll go through some models.
So should we get into the guts of the show? Should we
Yeah,
go into? Let's talk about why do people set up, what the perks of setting up in Hong Kong.
sure. So the story was, we'll make it a little bit of story and learning. But I came out to China, and I wanted to, like you were joking earlier, become a Chinese seller, or really essentially have the benefits of speed. I think it's really was about speed. I wanted to develop products faster. Anybody knowing how frustrating it is to find a product online and buy it from a factory, get a sample shipped over, send back. It's a long process, but if you're on the ground in China or in Asia, it's much faster. So I came out here and I wanted to register a company. I wanted to set up a trading office,
Mhm.
and luckily I was almost going to just set up a Chinese company. We can talk a little bit about. I don't know if your listeners would want to know or hear, the differences of Hong Kong and mainland China. There's some political things, but there is some differences. And I was guided by a lawyer back in 2007 when I first started this process to not open up a Chinese company, but do a Hong Kong company first that then owns the Chinese company later. And maybe listeners might not be needing to have an office in China, but maybe a lot of people have been doing a Hong Kong structure, even if they're overseas, in the western side of the world. So it's known to be a good B2B trading entity for buying from factories in China, or even mentioned in Thailand, or usually it's Hong Kong, and of course, to give some options, some people also choose Singapore. These are the top two Asia-based headquarters for Amazon sellers, or essentially really product-based trading companies or brand owners, because of, I don't, we could talk about some of the advantages, but basically it's a lower to sometimes no tax, but I usually advise people to pay taxes somewhere.
Mhm.
But you can try to go for an offshore claim. But again, data sharing around the world, just like with Amazon and Facebook, I think also happens with governments. So I don't really advise to try to get around not paying anywhere. So usually people choose to pay in Hong Kong, which is 16.5% tax, or as low as 8.75 on the first 2 million of Hong Kong dollars of revenue.
Yeah.
And so that's usually much lower than most places, even in mainland China. Like I said, if I just open it up directly in China, it's usually around 30-40%, and also difficult for multi-currencies and banking regulations. So Singapore is similar too. I don't know if you want to talk about the differences, but that's usually why people choose one of those two options, and they can get lower taxes. It's also English banking with the UK. You're here from London, and obviously the British influence in Hong Kong gave it English legal structures. So there's English and Chinese in all of the court systems, and
Yeah.
people trust it as a quote unquote first world country and system based on the UK laws and systems.
Gotcha. So talk me through some of the disadvantages of being based in Hong Kong for your business.
Sure. It's rocked my world. I'm actually a partner in a CPA company at Unipro, and a few years ago, probably many people heard about the banking crackdowns. So it hasn't been as easy for virtual-based companies without maybe a physical office in Hong Kong or more presence in Hong Kong to get banking options. I covered as much as I can in my content, but basically the banking has gotten much harder for kind of the international digital nomads, maybe, or the even Amazon sellers outside of Hong Kong or Asia. And another one is the audits. I know it's a very painful process. Audits, it sounds scary, especially for Americans. Audits usually means governments are cracking down and want to check your books. But in Hong Kong, it's a yearly mandatory audit where a licensed CPA in Hong Kong has to check your bookkeeping, check maybe your Xero or your QuickBooks or your Excel files and match them up and make sure there's no funny things happening, and that's not free. So usually, that depends on the complexity and the person you're finding, but usually it's a couple $1,000s a year, maybe a little bit less if you're not so active, and could be a few thousand more. So the upkeep is a little bit expensive. Probably all in two to thousand. There's also the address and other forms. So it's a little bit on the fixed amount compared to maybe U.S. or the Western world. I'm not sure about European places, but you might pay higher fixed, but you'll pay less tax usually when all together.
Gotcha.
I wanted to use a Hong Kong structure for my own Amazon. I got back into Amazon a couple of years ago. I did it many years before. But as a U.S. citizen, if anybody goes through the process to open up a Seller Central, at least for the U.S. market, I'm primarily focused on the U.S. market. It will say, if you say I'm a foreign company, it doesn't have to be Hong Kong, could be UK, could be anywhere. It says, I want to register on Amazon Seller Central as a non-U.S. entity. And then it says, under perjury of law, whatever, some scary legal corporate stuff, it says, if any owner in this company is a shareholder over 10% ownership is an American citizen, say yes or no. And obviously I'm an American citizen. I am over 10% owner in a structure. So it kicks you back to the first page. It says, sorry, you need to select as a U.S. person or as a U.S. entity to continue. So basically, if there's American citizens in the corporate structure, you'd have to, at least at the first level, have a U.S. company such as Delaware or Wyoming. And but actually the way we have it structured is the shares I own are in the Hong Kong company that owns the U.S. company. So as I said earlier about like having a Chinese company, mainland Chinese company with a Hong Kong structure on top, we actually have that structure where the shares are owned. Hong Kong level owns the U.S. company, but at that you still have to either as an individual, which is not, I don't advise to sell in your personal name. I don't know if you have anybody on your show talk about liability. Of course, if it's very nerve-wracking if you use your personal name to sell online, whether it's eBay, Amazon, your own website, there's liability if somebody has God forbid, any kind of. I had a couple close calls, honestly, in my years. But if you have a company, it protects your liability, at least from losing all of your personal funds. So usually you have to set up a U.S. company if you're an American citizen, but you can still have Hong Kong, Singapore, UK, any other company at the next level up.
So tell me more about Delaware.
It's a tricky question. I mean, Wyoming's gotten pretty hot as well. I honestly, I'm not as an expert, and I'm American myself, but I'm not as much an expert on U.S. corporate structure. I picked Delaware because it's still kind of just the most common structure for businesses, most businesses. But I would advise listeners maybe just to be fair, check out Wyoming as well. Mm-hmm. I think Nevada used to be there, but usually what you're looking at for the criteria, just so I know you're like, oh, these bloody Americans, but there's different states. Mm-hmm. So each state also has different taxes and structure. So, the United States of America, USA, is actually 50 states. I don't know, maybe it's 51. I don't know, Puerto Rico or something, but it's 50. I think it's 50. And each state you can incorporate in in at least one. You could do more, honestly, but that's usually if you have like a bar, a restaurant, or a local business, or you hiring staff there. So usually you just have to pick one state. So Delaware is popular because it has no state tax. You don't have to pay tax there, and it's also very low franchise fee or yearly fees. So I think it's just a few $100s a year fixed fee plus no state tax, but everybody in the US, they have to do federal, which is like, the tax of the United States of America, but the state. And a little fun fact, my first company I did when I started selling on eBay, basically I had no idea what I was doing in 2004. I started selling on my personal name. And I got an advisor telling me, you can't sell your personal name. There's so much liability. So I was living in Wall Street. I set up a New York City company. And that's the worst place, for an Amazon seller at least, or eBay or online business, because you don't need to have an office there. But it's the highest tax because they have a New York City tax, which nobody else has. Or maybe there's one or two other cities. In New York state tax and a federal tax. So you have to pay 3 levels of tax, whereas with Delaware, I think Wyoming and some others is 0 state. Of course, there's no city tax, so you just pay federal.
Yeah.
So I hope this is helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. So who's this most suited for? Whereabouts in your business are you before you start delving into setting it up in companies in Hong Kong, or having Hong Kong and then having a holding company in China, etc.?
I'd feel more comfortable say a million in revenue, maybe $500,000 yearly, because there's, like I said, you're going to pay some higher fixed costs, like with the audits. You don't have to go to Hong Kong always, but if you do want to get a traditional bank, you'd have to go there. So obviously you're paying flights, things like that. So I would say at least I would recommend. I feel more comfortable with them.
So if you're doing a comfortable 7-figure turnover.
Yep. And then also it could be for hiring in Asia, or it could be doing sourcing offices or doing business with suppliers. One other thing to consider is where you want your trademarks, your IP, or your brand owned. Another popular thing people do is they own their brand in Hong Kong or in Asia, and then they can license, or they can do wholesale orders maybe globally from Hong Kong.
Yeah.
The strategy is, of course, lower tax, but also you look more like a quote-unquote Chinese seller or a factory or a trading company, whereas if you're like in the UK or US saying, hey, buy from my Chinese factory, but here's my invoice from America, that's one reason I liked it. When I moved out, I felt like more authoritative when I was sending out wholesale prices, and I was doing some more B2B distribution to building your brand.
Yeah, makes sense. So top down, if we were to wrap here, walk me through all the steps that people would need to do. Who would they need to contact to make these kind of services happen, to get into the point of tax efficiency?
Sure. Basically, of course, I mentioned earlier, I'm a partner in a CPA firm, Unipro Hong Kong, which is a licensed firm. So, of course, if people would like to check us out, uniprohk.com. I have a ton of blogs for free on globalfromasia.com and a book, Hong Kong Supercharged, I wrote.
Excellent. And what else have you got coming up?
Yeah, well, I was chatting to you. We have a boot camp coming up, which is our first intensive multi-day training seminars. You mentioned a cross-border summit, which has been popular. Mm-hmm. This is a little bit more smaller and more intensive, 3-hour minimum sessions for a few days on end, and it'll be in July 19th to 21st in Chiang Mai, Thailand. We had all the details at globalfromasia.com/bootcamp.
Excellent. Michael, thank you for joining us. Guys, thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you again in the next few days. Take care.